The next light bulb moment I want to talk about is leadership. What kind of leadership increases the chances that a charity will operate in a donor-centered way? That was the question. There's been a huge amount of work done on leadership, and there are umpteen books on leadership, and lots of people who have developed an expertise and a specialist in leadership. It's not an area that I have any particular authority in, but I do think leadership of this kind is something that was good for the Commission to focus on. So I would urge you to get the report from this particular group. I don't know why, the clicker's not working all that well. These are conclusions from CDE Project 17, Leadership for a Great Donor Experience. They concluded that you should define, champion, and reinforce what success looks like in terms of your supporters' experience with your charity and why it matters, and then disseminate that widely through the organization. Build great relationships, we all know about that. Recruit much more carefully and deliberately. Culture. Culture is a subject that you rarely see a session in fundraising conferences focusing specifically on culture. I think that should change. Their advice was to invest to create a stable, adaptable, empowered environment. So the notion was that outside of your organization there might be chaos, but inside you should have a strong culture that is protected and preserved, that people can rely on and depend on. That we should be treating supporters as complete human beings rather than just as in the segments, the silos that we tend to group them, and that we should practice whole organization fundraising. Make sure everyone buys into the fundraising culture and is part of the fundraising strategy within an organization. Now, this is huge. This is not the bleeding obvious. I think that there's a great deal of content. In fact, I think we've got a lot further to go to really define and capture the changes that we need to make in leadership. I think it's a work in progress, as so many of the Commission's outputs are works in progress. But I think leadership is about influence, and we shouldn't over-elevate it. Peter Drucker famously says, culture eats strategy for breakfast. I know many fundraising organizations who go to endless lengths and spend a huge amount of time developing their strategy, but have done very little about their culture. And I certainly agree with Drucker there. Michael Watkins, who's also an American organizational guru, culture is the organizational immune system. I quite like that. And this is actually a quote from me. Your culture is the core foundation of the donor's experience. Donors notice the difference between organizations because different organizations will have different culture. Sometimes culture is more noted because it's absent than it's present. So we want to end hippo moments. Do you know what hippo moments are? Hippo is the highest paid person in the organization. If you have a strong culture, it belongs to everyone. I think we've still got too many hippos. I love hippos, really. But everyone has to be committed to the change, no exception. Another gaping void bit of enlightenment, a new approach to donors. If the CEO isn't on board, you're wasting your time. I totally agree with that. To which the fundraiser replies, well, that makes it easier. And a little bit facetious there, but I think there is some truth in that. So still on the subject of leadership, we need to look at the role of trustees, boards, and senior managers. The board and the senior management team have to be involved in fundraising. I really do believe that very strongly. Charity boards and senior management teams need to change their mindset to recognize that fundraising is good for donors and beneficiaries and good for the organization and is not a necessary evil. I don't know if that's ever the case in the Netherlands, but it is often the case in the UK that people view fundraising as the grubby money bit that we have to do, a necessary evil. Boards need to recognize that putting the donor at the heart of the charity is the responsibility of everyone, not just fundraisers. Without the support of the board, the CEO, and the senior management team, donor-centered strategies will fail or never get started. That's one of the messages I will be giving to chief executives tomorrow. This comes from my project, the use and misuse of emotion. Every board should be an emotional board. Start each meeting with a mission story. Now, you maybe already do that. Set up a guest at table scheme. This is an idea I pinched from the Netherlands. Gast aan tafel. Am I right? Is that pronounced correctly? Wow. I saw this years ago. I don't even remember which organization. I'll show you how that influenced one of Britain's top 20 charities. ActionAid set up an empty space at the table. Initially, we did it for our poor and marginalized people, our beneficiaries. Then we decided to have a chair also at our board table for our supporters. And then, because we realized that at our board meetings, there were 2,500 staff around the world who were hugely interested in what we were talking about, we had an empty chair for them. And actually, it became, the boardroom didn't have enough room for these empty chairs. So what we did was we created this sign and we put it up on the wall of the boardroom. And everybody on the board looked at this and remembered that these three important groups were hugely interested. And it was as if they were just standing outside the door or seated just at the back of the room, listening intently to what we were talking about. Every board should be an emotional board. Encourage trustees to visit projects and on return get them to tell an emotional story. Decorate your walls and other available spaces with emotional images and captions that tell your cause's story. And if your board members aren't natural storytellers, train them in the art and craft of storytelling. So I want to come back to the decorate your walls bit, but first I do want to tell you a story. And I think a lot of these things become easier if we focus on the fact that we, in our organizations, have to find and build the dream. So I want to tell you a little true story which involves these two characters. I don't know who the guy on the right is, but the guy on the left is Walt Disney. Now, you may have heard this story, but it's a really cracking story. Walt Disney is famous for creating Disneyland. And in the mid-1950s, while I was counting pennies and eating fudge, Walt Disney cleared a huge area outside the city of Anaheim in California to create the world's first Disneyland. And he gathered around him all of the people who were going to work on the project, the architects and the planners and the engineers and the scientists and the plumbers and all of that. Huge gathering, and he stood up on a platform and he said to them, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to build Sleeping Beauty's palace right in the middle of the park. And there was an uproar from the assembled suppliers who said, no, Walt, you can't do that. The first thing we've got to do is lay the infrastructure, put all the cables and all the sewage systems and all the... And Walt said, no, that is not what we're going to do. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to build Sleeping Beauty's palace in the center of the lot where everyone can see it. Just by lifting their eyes, they will see the dream. They will see why we are here. And this will inspire them to work harder, to give 100% plus to this great project that we're just embarking on. And I think that's a wonderful analogy for what we have to do in our organizations. We have to build Sleeping Beauty's palace, and we have to make it clear to our manifold audiences that this is why they are here. This is the dream. This is what they're here for. So this is also Sleeping Beauty's palace, but it's taken from the side, and it's taken at night. And I took that picture. It's from Euro Disney at Paris. And there's something else going on in this picture as well. There's a starburst. Actually, I lied. I photoshopped that in later. But I wish I had got that. But the point is that we have to show the dream in different ways, but it has to be always the same recognizable dream. So this guy was brilliant at that. He stood up in the Mall and he issued words that echoed around the world. He didn't say, I have a strategy. He didn't say, I have a rolling 4-year plan. He said, I have a dream. And I think if he would have been a fabulous fundraiser, but if he'd been a fundraiser, he'd have gone on and said, you too share this dream, and here's what you can do now to make this dream come true. So this is about capturing your inspiration and building Sleeping Beauty's palace. And now this is back to walls, decorating your walls in your offices. I've made a career out of visiting charities, not-for-profit organizations. They are among the dullest and least welcoming places to visit. You do not get a good cup of coffee. You do not get a nice, comfortable reception area. You do in some. But generally speaking, you get this. I have sat in major INGOs, and there's absolutely no indication of what the organization does or is. So I think we should tell a story here. I found this next to a major grant-making trust's office, but it was actually the neighbor who was a marketing company, and this was 15 feet high in their offices, occupied the whole of the wall, and it said, ordinary is everywhere except in here. Here you're safe, because in this building, under this banner, extraordinary is making its last stand. I thought, wow, I know what these people are all about. Fantastic. So, look what appeared on one of our walls in our office. This is ActionAid telling the story of their supporter, Sarah Sullivan, and using the wall in front of where everybody has to come to make the coffee. And this is fantastic. And ActionAid actually decorated its whole walls. And then when they came to redecorate, they went back to the same old dull old way of doing things.